Hey alumni, this is John Steele, your host and post-graduation guide. Before we jump into this week's episode, I'm wondering, would you consider giving a gift to After 4? During the month of June, our team is working to raise $50,000 so that we can keep bringing you After 4, our other alumni podcast, InterVarsity World Changers, and a host of other alumni resources. All the work we do here is possible because alumni like you and other ministry partners make it happen through your financial support. We love getting to develop these resources for you. So if this podcast has blessed you or someone you know, or if you just like the idea of helping alumni make the transition to life after graduation, please, during the month of June, consider following the giving link in the show notes and help us continue making more of your favorite alumni podcast After 4. Thanks, alumni. We're grateful for your support. Hey, InterVarsity alumni. This is After 4, your podcast for navigating life after graduation. This is both an exciting and potentially tricky transition that you're making, and you might feel a little unsure about the coming weeks and months. We're here to provide you with expert advice, practical skills, and plenty of encouragement as you learn how to keep saying yes to Jesus in your new context. This is After 4, and this podcast is for you, alumni. What's up, alumni? Welcome to After 4, your podcast for navigating life after graduation. I'm your host and guide, John Steele, and a shout out in particular to any new 2024 grads joining us for the first time. So glad you made it. Hey, this week we're kicking off our new summer series. Over the next 5 weeks, we're going to be looking at some best practices for keeping rest incorporated into our regular life rhythms. We'll be looking at day-to-day recreation as rest, weekly Sabbath rhythms, and even developing a healthy mindset around using that vacation time that your employer provides. If you don't have it yet, just give it time. You will eventually. Those conversations are upcoming, but for today, we're going to sit down with Alan Fadling, a spiritual director, a podcast host, and an author of a number of different IVP titles, such as A Year of Slowing Down, An Unhurried Life, and his latest release, A Non-Anxious Life. And Alan is going to help us establish a framework for rest in general before we jump into specific topics in the coming weeks. And he's also going to give us some very practical tips for beginning to set up healthy rhythms of rest in this new season of post-graduation life. Here's Alan, and this one's for you, alumni. Well, hello, Alan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for the invitation. It's good to be with you.
You're going to help us kick off a new series that we're doing, talking about rest and retreat. So I'm excited to engage with that with you. But before we do it, would you just help us get to know you a little bit, Alan? Who are you?
Yeah, well, I always like to answer a question like that by starting with my identity in Jesus. I am a beloved son of my Father in heaven. It's usually better to start there than my job title or some of the other stuff about me. You don't need a bio first. How about that?
There you go. There you go. That's great.
Now, that being said, I've been in ministry for about 40 years now. I've been married 39 of those 40 years. I've got 3 sons who are all well beyond college-aged years. And my connection with InterVarsity, other than all of my books have been published by the press, 5 of them now, one of the critical moments in our early leadership life happened at Urbana 1990.
Wow.
And in a 60-second moment of silence, God gave us a vision for what we are now doing today, nearly 35 years later.
Wow.
So that's, I have a long connection with InterVarsity and a great affection for the movement and the ministry.
That is amazing. And you are among good friends who have experienced the Lord's direction at a place like Urbana.
Yes. I know.
So, Alan, you've spent a lot of time writing, ministering, thinking about, sharing around topics that I think are really going to help inform our conversation and give us some handholds moving forward in this series. So can you give us just a sort of a brief intro to some of the work that you've done around topics like, anxiety, rest, being unhurried? These are some of the different topics that you've touched on. And I know there's many more than that, but just give us a little bit of a background of the ministry that you have done.
Yeah. So, just a thumbnail of my work. In these 40 years of ministry, 20 of them were spent mostly in the local church, serving communities, congregations. And then the other 20 have been more so working with leaders, as a coach, as a spiritual director, as a retreat leader, and then more recently, writing. My first book, the subtitle of it is Following Jesus' Rhythms of Work and Rest. I've wrestled long with what does it look like to live deeply in the rest that God gives and to live profoundly in the work that God gives, that they're both gifts that God is offering. I'm still learning the deep goodness of the pace of Jesus' unhurried way. I've come to believe that is a beautiful way to describe him that we need in our North American context that can be so hurried, so busy. We imagine that the more we do, the better we are. And that kind of identity is exhausting.
Yes.
When you're young, you can pull it off a while. Move into your 30s, your 40s. I'm in my 60s. You start to run out of gas if that's how. If you got to prove yourself to that degree over and over time, it's exhausting. So the last thing I'll say is that I've been learning most recently that the very best work grows in the soil of good rest. So they're integrated. They are not. It's not a cycle between rest, work, rest, work, rest, work. It's an integrated reality.
Alan, as I was prepping for our conversation, it struck me just out of nowhere that I have heard you speak before.
Is that right?
I think it would have been right around 2014 or so. I'm on staff in Minnesota. You came to our regional staff conference and spoke about Jesus' unhurried approach to ministry and how just counterintuitive that was. And all I can say is that I'm really glad that I get to sit here with you today because I wish then that I had applied more of what I learned from you that day. And I know I could have read books and listened to your podcasts and things like that between now and then, certainly. But I'm super grateful that I get to hang out with you today and talk about this because I'm looking forward to sort of a refreshed perspective as I continue as a minister of the gospel, as a parent, as a husband, and wanting to learn more about what it looks like to have this balance of rest and work and a lack of hurry. And so I'm really excited to get to hang out with you today, Alan.
Well, me too. It's a treat. I am still a learner. I keep saying, like my friends in recovery, I'm still in recovery from some of my habits of hurry and anxiety and some of the other things that don't serve me as well as they pretend to.
Well, Alan, as we step into this series, we're going to be looking at sort of different rhythms of rest, different intervals of rest that we can experience and that we can encourage our young alumni into. For you, I'm hoping that you can help us sort of lay a foundation and really just get an idea for rest kind of as a bigger picture. And so I'm gonna start just by asking an extremely obvious question, which I usually do, so forgive me. But the first question that I would really love for you to speak into is, can you just help us get an idea, what is rest actually?
Yeah.
I'm hoping that you can give us a better understanding for what it looks like to engage with rest, what it is. Is it physical? Is it spiritual? Is it something we can even really know in this time and in this space? So, I'm sure you could take the rest of our time just answering that question, but as best as you can, Alan, what is rest?
Yeah, well, it's one of those deceptively simple sounding questions. Like, just get out your dictionary, read the 3 sentences under the word rest,
right.
The end, But I think it is nuanced, it is physical. Rest is going to bed and waking up in the morning. Your body needs that. Rest is when Jesus says, "Are you burdened? Are you weary? Come to me, follow me, take my yoke, and you will find rest for your soul." That's a different sort of facet of rest. It's the rest that happens within us. It looks different than the common anxiety of our cultural setting right now. It looks different than the kind of burnout that so many are experiencing in so many different settings. So it's something good for our bodies. It's something good for our minds. It's something good for our souls. It's actually something good for our work. So one of the things I always want to say when people ask about rest is you've got to eject the idea that rest is just the word work with a red slash through it. A lot of times our definition of rest is just a negative, not working.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
No, it's more than that. It's more than a not, because in that definition, work is important and valuable. Rest is just the thing you do when you can't work. So you only stay there as long as you need to, like recharging a battery so you can get back to the important thing, which is work. Now, I say that and want to affirm that work is a gift God gives, but there is such a thing as overwork, and there is such a thing as workaholism. And these are not great relationships that we sometimes have with our work. So rest isn't just a place to recharge and then go out and do more work. Rest is something positive. It is a gift. It is renewal. It is restoration. It's reconnecting with God and with others and with my own soul. It's refreshment. It's time not measured by the ruler of productivity, but measured in terms of friendship or worship or enjoyment or creativity or remembering who I am. The last thing I'll say is that rest is where I remember who I am. And so then work is where I share who I am.
Wow.
In our culture, we get that mixed up. And we imagine our work is where we prove who we are. Well, again, if your identity is a paycheck you have to keep earning, you'll run out of gas eventually trying to do it. And you realize it's not even working.
It's interesting that you talk about rest as something that is a gift to us, because I notice in myself, even just in like small moments, small opportunities to pause throughout the day, let alone preparing for potential vacation or whatever, the times that I think about, okay, I got to load more work on here so that once it's time for me to take a break, that I will have earned my break. And it feels to me like that it maybe is a misunderstanding of an invitation into rest.
Yeah. So in An Unhurried Life, one of the things I said in the chapter on rest, I said we have to get into our thinking that work is a gift, it is a grace, and rest is a gift. Neither of them in the end are earned nor deserved. They are something God is doing in us and through us. It's something God is a way God is wanting to be with us. God loves being with us as his fellow workers. God loves to be with us in the garden to just visit and sort of have some holy hanging around. What this says is that at the heart of my resting and my working is my communion with God.
Wow.
That's what matters the most. Enjoy God. Enjoy God in work. Enjoy God in rest. And so that has been, I would call it a paradigm shift for me. I think of my whole life as more gift than I used to. That's not to say I'm not invited to work really hard, but I'm not mostly earning something with my work, even though paychecks come on the other end of work. I'm mostly expressing something God's giving me in my work.
Alan, as we talk about some of these things, it makes me wonder about the ways that Scripture in particular talks about rest. Where would we go to start developing a scriptural foundation for the idea of rest?
Yeah, so I'll just start by saying I did a lot of that kind of work in An Unhurried Leader and An Unhurried Life.
Okay.
So those are two kind of great workbooks. That being said, I think there are a number of places. I'll just suggest a few. One, the beginning of the story in Genesis. Before Sabbath is a Jewish law, it's a rhythm of creation. And so we've got to understand that this is how God made the world. Anybody who has tried to work 7 days and rest 0 has learned that doesn't work. Any more than resting 7 days and working 0 doesn't work either.
Yeah.
Neither of those work. That work 6, rest 1, all of which is lived in communion with God. That's a Genesis story. That's an origin story. That is how the world works. That is how we were made. We were made to work and we were made to rest. And that's important.
Yes.
Another place I would encourage people to go is just read the Gospels with the question in mind, how do I see Jesus living restfully? What do I notice about the pace of Jesus in the gospel story? the Gospels show a rhythm of withdrawal in the life of Jesus for prayer, and I would argue for rest. The Gospel of Luke tells us that he often withdrew to lonely places to pray. Well, what's that mean? Jesus often went to lonely places to sort of direct a monologue at God, for hours and hours of saying things to God, or was it to enjoy the presence of his Father in heaven? I think that vision of what Jesus did when he withdrew often is why the disciples said, teach us how to do that. Teach us how to do that thing you're doing, because we're drawn to that. The way we've seen other people practice prayer has not inspired us very much, but what we see in you, in your life with God, we'd like to learn how to live that way too. So I think thinking of this rest rhythm as a facet of our discipleship to Jesus might help us. And then lastly, I love the chapter in the letter to the Hebrews, chapter 4.
Yes.
One of the lines that just grabs me is, the writer says, make every effort to enter his rest. That is an interesting sentence.
It is.
Make every effort to. Now, how would you, if I didn't give you the last three words and you didn't have that passage memorized, enter his rest would not be how you think that sentence ends.
No, absolutely not.
There's a lot of other things you would think, make every effort to, and then it's going to be some work or job or tasks, or it's going to involve sweat, something. So what I want to say in that, what I learned from Hebrews 4 is that good rest is hard work.
Wow.
It just is. It's actually hard to rest well. It's easy to numb out. It's easy to escape. It's easy to just put the thing in neutral. That is not always rest. You'll know if you've rested if at the end of whatever it is you're doing or not doing, you have some sense of refreshment, some sense of renewal, some sense of peace or joy. I know when I have kind of practiced some kind of counterfeit rest when I'm mildly depressed or I feel kind of soul weary, like I've just turned on the TV mindlessly and just sort of done nothing. I don't feel at the end of those 3 or 4 hours, wow, I'm refreshed and renewed. Wow, that was so good for my soul. No. So you can tell if you've rested or not rested. So anyway, I think those are at least some of the places in Scripture that have been good places for me.
Alan, do you have any insight for me that can help? If rest is so good, why is it that these other things are that we're so prone to do these other things that we would label as rest, but aren't actually restful instead?
Yeah. Well, I'm going to guess there's a lot of answers to that question.
Okay.
I'll give you a couple that come to my mind. One is, I don't think this will come as any shock to you. We are a culture that highly values work and doesn't understand rest. Little kids know how to rest. Now, sometimes even they fight it.
Yeah.
But they take naps and they do that. So the thing I want to say is sometimes I've been so tired, I'm too tired to rest. Like I cannot do the little bit of work it would take to actually rest. All I have the energy for is to just numb out or escape or avoid. And the thing is, if you numb out, by definition, what that says is you don't feel your tiredness. Doesn't mean you're resting, just means you don't feel your tiredness. Now, when the numb wears off, you're probably going to feel tireder. So one of the things I've realized is just as true as it is to say that good rest is hard work, good rest is something you have to learn how to do. And so making space for ways in which you will be renewed. Sometimes that might be a day where, you don't have a to-do list, not even a house-related to-do list, maybe not even a personal errand to-do list. Maybe you give yourself a day that is just measured by what might I enjoy today? God, how would you like to spend this day together? So that has been important, just to realize resting is hard work. Now, that's kind of overstated for effect, But, it does take some work to rest well, to put myself in the place where I can be renewed or refreshed or restored or to be able to reconnect. And it's much easier just to kind of put the car of my life in neutral and just roll down whatever hills in front of me. That doesn't usually lead to refreshment or rest.
Alan, as you think about learning that it takes time to learn and to understand what does it look like to engage with rest. What are the things that I need? What are the things that need to be removed? Thinking about our primary audience here and alumni who are making the transition into this, what will for many be decades of professional career and sorting out what that looks like, this transition to life after graduation. Why is it important for them to start thinking about rhythms of rest right now? My guess is that most of them are thinking about, I gotta make a name for myself at work. I gotta start figuring out what am I gonna do for the rest of my life. I've studied a lot, now I'm gonna do a lot. And why is now the right time to be thinking about rhythms of rest in the midst of that?
Yeah. The reason it's important to learn now is what I said a moment ago. It's not natural. It's not easy. I have been a pastor to nearly every age span from junior high to retirement age adults and all the little chapters in between that you can probably imagine. There is always a reason to postpone rest. Next season, need to get established in my job. Once I kind of get my feet under me, then I'll start to have a better balance. Oh, I met somebody special. And now we have a family, and now there are children, and now I'm in an even more responsible job than I had 10 years ago. Maybe the next season, kids get a little older. I'll just tell you, there's never a time when rest is easy. The reason a lot of retirees struggle to rest is they never learned how to. Just because you don't have a job does not automatically make your life restful. So what I want to say is, just like athletes learn at high altitude to run and sort of gain some better aerobic capacity.
Yeah.
In these early years as you're starting, when it feels to you like I don't have time for that, this is exactly when you have time for that. You learn now how to live into the gifts of God's gift of work, God's gift of rest. You learn how to do that now. You will carry that into the rest of your adult life. That's when my wife and I in our 20s began to learn some of these rhythms. We then practiced them as parents of young kids, and we practiced these patterns and rhythms in our early years of ministry, and then our kids became teens, and then we moved into our 40s and 50s, and at every challenge, every season had its challenge. But we took the lessons we learned in our 20s all the way up till now in our 60s. So what I'm trying to say is the value of these divine rhythms, these God-given rhythms, to learn them now and to carry them through your whole life. That's the opportunity that lies before you.
What are some practical steps that somebody who has graduated and is in these early days, do you have like one or two practical steps that they could take today to start integrating healthy rhythms of rest?
So what I always say, whether I'm talking to a young leader kind of stepping into their lives, into their work life, or I'm talking to someone who's a few decades into their adult life, I always say whatever is worth doing in terms of something of spiritual health is worth starting small. Plant a seed. Make it so small that it will not be hard to keep doing, because it's the regularity and the repetition and the persistence over time that makes the difference. What a lot of us have as an instinct is, ooh, that would be healthy. Let's do it on steroids. Like, let's do it as fireworks.
Right.
And as though you could sustain that for anything longer than a few weeks or a couple of months if you really got a lot of, juice. So our instinct to start big usually means start big and peter out. But if you start small, this is how creation works. Things are growing.
Yeah.
They're not growing fast. growing slow.
Yeah.
That's how the world God made works, actually. And the best things, even related to our spiritual practices and to doing our work well, there is a kind of underlying slowness to something that's going to be good in a long-term way. So very practically, I would say, do what you can to arrange for at least part of one day a week that is not connected to your email, where you are not thinking about your job. If you have to negotiate that with someone who supervises you, work on that. But weekly, try to set aside time to just enjoy your life. Enjoy the people in your life. Do a bit of holy nothing. Resist the temptation to make your smartphone your default mode. Give it a rest. Put it in a room that you're not in. Let it charge. Don't even touch it. Man, sometimes that can be one of the most restful things you do, to just give yourself a media break, a connectivity break. Sit in a chair for 5 minutes. And then when you do and you feel how itchy you get inside, just ask yourself why you're so itchy. What are you itching for? What do you think you're missing out on by sitting and doing what the Psalms invited us to do thousands of years ago? Be still.
Yeah.
Know that he's God. Be still. Remember. Just enjoy that God's God. That's what one of the things resting does, is it helps you remember you're not God. And we get into a lot of trouble thinking that we are the sovereigns, like we're in charge of everything and nothing's going to happen if it's not us. Actually, you are not nearly as indispensable as you may think that you are. And God is already up to some really good things, even in your actual job, in your actual place.
Yes.
God is already at work. And whether your job has a religious kind of tone to it, or whether you're just working in the organizational world, I said that in air quotes, God is with you in the working and in the resting. And so I think that's what I would say, is just start now, start small, something daily, try maybe something weekly, and see what happens. What do you learn about yourself? And then keep going.
Alan, is there anything that we have missed, or a final piece of advice that you would want to give to an alum who's just graduated as it relates to developing healthy rhythms of rest?
Yeah. Right here is the perfect place to start learning how to rest, if that's a place of struggle for you. Right here and right now. God's here. You're here. Your life and whatever fills it is here. This very place, Jesus knows exactly what he's doing and would love to coach you, mentor you, guide you, counsel you. He would love to help you not only do your work well with him, like as a collaboration, but he would love to help you find rest for your soul.
Wow.
So that instead of being anxious, instead of being so frantically worried about what everybody else thinks, you could step into your work from a place of confidence and a place of holy fullness. The last thing I'll say is, ask yourself a question. When have you felt rested? Can you think of a moment, a situation, a kind of thing? Was it when you were, let's say you're a musician and you're playing your guitar and you're not doing it in front of people to impress folks, you're just enjoying the guitar.
Yeah.
For a lot of people, and a creative expression is a great way to rest. For me, I'll go into my yard and I'll putz around cutting things and trimming things and cleaning things up. For some people, that's mind numbing. It sounds like just another chore. Who wants that? Well, turns out I do. Turns out for me, I love kind of just enjoying the fact that I have this little piece of property that I get to take care of. And I have this feeling sometimes that I get to just enjoy the presence of God as I take care of this little piece of the world that he's entrusted to me as a steward. So that question, what helps you rest? Lean into that and then experiment with making time for that activity or that non-activity. For some, it's finding something nearby, a pathway, a lake, a forest, an ocean, whatever, something in God's creation, and just being there for no other reason than to enjoy that God made it and enjoy the presence of God in it. Sometimes that is restful for people. And then be with your friends, not to network and, get your LinkedIn profile more visible or something, if you're into such a thing, but be with your friends to just enjoy your friends and see how that feels. Many of your listeners probably already do things like that. Many ways, the younger generation is better at that than my generation has been. But what can you enjoy? And what can you make time to enjoy? And how can you enjoy that in the presence of God?
That's fantastic. I so appreciate those things. And I think, one of the things you just shared that really stands out to me, like for me personally, it is that idea of when is a time that I've felt rested? Okay, that's something I should pay attention to. What does it look like to replicate or lean in or to apply that into a regular rhythm? It feels like it removes some of the mystique, the mystery of, what is actually restful for me? Well, when did you feel rested? Okay, let's start there, John.
Exactly.
Rather than trying to reinvent the wheel, let's just go with what's worked, and how can I apply that in useful ways? I appreciate that, Alan. For people who want to continue leaning in to this idea in particular, you have a lot of resources I know that people could engage with. Could you just share a few places that people could keep engaging with your work? And we can be sure to put some things in the show notes as well to make it easily clickable.
Thank you. Well, yeah, there are a lot of ways that we want to be of service. Obviously, the books that I've published through InterVarsity Press, I think those are very helpful. There are 5 of them. I am also the host of a podcast that's been running for about 6 or 7 years. We're coming up on episode 300.
Wow.
So there are conversations with authors on these themes. I will point especially, though, to a 4-episode series, fall of 2023, on the theme of rest. So
Perfect.
I talked about a good rest ethic. What's that look like? 7 reasons we don't rest well. Counterfeits to true rest. So that whole numbing and escaping dynamic. I talked about that. And then the good work of soul rest was the close of that series. That series could be a nice addition to what you all are talking about in your conversation here coming up. And then our website, unhurriedliving.com, there are a lot of resources for free and some that are paid, but a lot of resources in the spirit of what we're talking about that could be of more help.
Perfect. We will post those things in the show notes, give people kind of a leg up for being able to investigate more of those ideas. Alan, thank you so much. I am really grateful that you're helping us set up this next series. Thank you for the work that you've done in other spaces, and thanks so much for the work that you've done here with us today in helping our alumni get a leg up for resting well at the beginning of this new phase of life, and to be something that they can carry with them into the following decades. Thank you so much, Alan.
Oh, you're so welcome. It's been a pleasure to be with you. And my prayer for your listeners is that they will find a way to learn from Jesus how to integrate their working and their resting life, and that they'll find the fruitfulness of that journey.
As I already mentioned, I love the advice to start small. Whether it's always been a challenge to establish healthy rhythms of rest, or if you're just trying to figure out how to contextualize your best practices to your new environment, starting small can make for some easy early wins. Don't feel like you have to be able to completely nail some really robust plan right off the bat. Start small and gradually grow as you develop a sense for what works and what's actually restful for you. And if you need more help, keep listening to the upcoming episodes and check the show notes for more resources from Alan. Alan, thanks again for joining us today. I so appreciate your guidance as we step into these conversations around different rhythms of rest. Alumni, check back in next week for my conversation with Stacy Jackson, personal trainer, triathlete, and director of healthy living at my local YMCA. She and I are going to chat about recreation and its place in our day-to-day rhythms of rest. And don't forget to visit the giving link in the show notes during the month of June and help support more of your favorite alumni podcast after 4. Thanks for tuning in, and I will see you in the after, alumni. Hey, thanks so much for joining us today, alumni. If there was anything that you learned, really enjoyed, or that encouraged you from today's episode, would you send us a DM or tag us in a story? We'd love to hear about it. You can find us at After4Pod on Instagram and Facebook. And if you haven't already, take just a second to unlock your phone and subscribe to the podcast. If your platform lets you, leave us a rating and a review. And if you like what we're doing here, share us with your InterVarsity or other post-graduation friends. Thanks again for listening, and I will see you in the after, alumni. Hey alumni, this is John Steele, your host and post-graduation guide. Before you jump to your next episode of After 4, I'm wondering, would you consider giving a gift to After 4? During the month of June, our team is working to raise $50,000 so that we can keep bringing you After 4, our other alumni podcast, InterVarsity World Changers, and a host of other alumni resources. All the work we do here is possible because alumni like you and other ministry partners make it happen through your financial support. We love getting to develop these resources for you. So if this podcast has blessed you or someone you know, or if you just like the idea of helping alumni make the transition to life after graduation, please, during the month of June, consider following the giving link in the show notes and help us continue making more of your favorite alumni podcast After 4. Thanks, alumni. We're grateful for your support.